It's a complex situation, but I'll do my best to explain. I have a bio son, Leo, 16, from my previous relationship. I married his stepmom, who is a mother of 2 boys, Connor, 20, deceased, and Derek, 12. I've never had the pleasure to meet Connor, who tragically passed away from a motorcycle accident. Derek was so devastated by this loss, and although it's been years, he's still pretty much grieving. I've seen tons of pictures and videos of Connor and made efforts to get to know who he was as a way to share Derek's grief and be there for him, to lend an ear and a comforting shoulder. It's safe to say that Derek and I grew a strong bond in no time. But my son Leo isn't close to Derek. Understandable, because not all siblings and step-siblings are the same. Leo and Derek are different in everything, which isn't a bad thing, but Leo calls himself the brutally honest type and makes insensitive comments about Derek most of the time. They tend to be under the guise of advice. Derek never complained, so I had to step in and tell Leo to stop being insensitive towards his stepbrother, especially with everything regarding Connor and his memory. Leo would say, "Okay, I get it, and I won't do it again." Days ago, Leo wanted to hang out with friends and asked Derek if he wanted to join. Derek agreed and put on Connor's hoodie before going out. Leo commented on the hoodie and called it ugly and asked him to put on something else, but Derek insisted on wearing it or not go. Leo dropped it. Hours later, Derek came home crying with his hoodie in hand. He said Leo and friends cut it into pieces while he was in the bathroom after they convinced him to take it off. I was furious. I asked Leo, and he said it was his friend's idea, then said he had to do it since Derek wears it everywhere, and it looked old and embarrassing. I reminded him who this hoodie belonged to, and he said, "So what? Maybe this will help him move on in life." I told him his birthday was cancelled and his friends aren't welcome anymore. He pitched a fit saying his birthday was a right, not a privilege, and I can't cancel it. He had my ex criticize my decision and wanted to host his birthday party, but I refused because he's grounded, so no party anywhere. She and her family called me awful and ridiculous and asked me to think how Leo will hate me for this, but I insisted he needed punishment for putting his stepbrother through this. I'm 15 years old. I have a stepsister who is a couple years older than me, and she is really seriously disabled. I'm not sure what's wrong with her because no one ever wants to discuss it with me, but she's nonverbal, breaks her bones a lot, and has severe epilepsy and will have many fitting episodes. She also doesn't understand stuff. That's probably the easiest way to put it. She's just a human body with nothing inside. She's my stepmom's daughter. My stepmom married my dad 3 years ago, and they dated only for a year before that. I don't know my stepmom very well, and I don't really get on with her. We are respectful to each other, but I'm basically living with strangers because she's so busy with her daughter and my dad. I am always on my own, and I used to hate it, but I'm used to it now. Ever since they moved in to live with us, life changed drastically for me because all the care now revolves around my stepsister. That's fine, I get it. But both my stepmom and my dad ask me to do things for my stepsister that I don't want to do and I resent doing. Stuff like staying home when I want to go to the mall with my friends. They're disappointed that I don't get her anything for her birthday with my very limited funds, etc. My own mom passed away when I was small, so I can't go and stay anywhere else, and all in all I'm just a lot more angry than I used to be, because they seem really disappointed whenever I say I don't want to do anything for her. Even stuff like feeding her, like I don't want to sit there feeding her banana pudding and wiping her drool. I didn't ask for this. Anyway, she recently fell a few days ago and had a seizure for 8 minutes. She was taken to hospital, and the doctors want to keep her in and look after her. I don't want to go and visit her. I remember seeing my mom in hospital before she died, and I just hate hospitals, and I sort of hate my stepsister, and I just don't want to go and visit someone who doesn't even know I'm there. My stepmom is really upset with me, and so is my dad. They haven't yelled at me or anything, but they are both being super cold towards me because I don't want to visit. My grandma, who lives in Canada, called me about the blue and told me it was okay. And I don't need to force myself to go to the hospital, so I'm assuming my dad has told her I'm refusing to go. He keeps pleading with me, but I keep telling him I'm not doing it. I told him hospitals remind me of mom, and he got even more upset and said my stepsister might die and I need to stop being so selfish towards my stepmom. My husband and I come from the same background. The only difference is that his mother isn't of that ethnicity, so he wasn't raised in the culture like I was. When we started dating, I helped him reconnect with his roots. This eventually led to him reaching out to his estranged father's family and becoming close with them. I think my mother-in-law has sort of held that against me ever since. Throughout the course of our relationship, she has made multiple comments about how she doesn't like the amount of emphasis I put on my heritage. When we told her I was pregnant with twins, she later said something about not wanting her future grandchildren to care about that stuff like I do. I've learned to ignore her comments because trying to explain myself to her has never helped. And I try to avoid conflicts whenever I can. My husband and I decided that the babies would have a first name from our culture, and their middle name would be a typical American name. My parents did the same thing with my name too, so it was just a continuation of that tradition. My mother-in-law ended up seeing texts between me and my husband where we said the middle names. But she assumed that we were talking about first names, so she went out and got the babies matching sweaters, with the names printed on the front of them. She showed the sweaters to me after they arrived. And I thanked her for the gift but didn't correct her on the fact that those were the middle names. I was sort of peeved that she had snooped through text messages to try to find out the names before we told her anyway. So I didn't want to give her their first ones on top of that. Last night when she was over at our house, she told me how relieved she was that we had chosen normal names for her grandchildren, and not a ridiculously difficult to pronounce name like mine. My husband asked what she was talking about. She repeated herself and he told her that actually, the babies did have names just like mine and he expected her to learn to say them. She brought up the text messages and the sweaters she bought, and then my husband explained our plan for their names. She got really pissed at me after that. Said I let her look like a fool for accepting the sweaters instead of telling her the actual names, which we still haven't shared with her, and that she'd be calling them by their middle names since that's what she knows them as now. My husband ended up asking her to leave. And after she was gone he said he wasn't upset at me or anything, but that he thinks I should have just told her she had the wrong info, instead of lying. I believe it started when I was around 6 years old. My parents often had friends over in the house. I didn't know they were polyamorous OFC. One day I was outside playing, got hurt, and when I ran inside caught my parents making out with some random guy. They told me they have other adults that they love and it's a completely normal thing. Me being a child just accepted that. They gave up being secretive and their partners would constantly be around, even joining on outings. I remember that on my 10th birthday they invited 3 of their partners, one of who I'd never seen before. And for the rest of the day my parents just withdrew from my party and hung out with them. I never saw them doing anything explicit again, but they would kiss their partners, hug them, make flirty comments. Something that would be normal between parents but with many more people. Sometimes I came home from school and my parents were gone and there was some random adult in our house. Some of them seemed surprised that my parents even had a child. I always hated it, but since my parents had told me this was normal, I assumed many adults probably did similar things and that it's just an adult thing all kids hate. Later they had less partners and eventually seemed to stop. Not that I'd know for sure. I moved out with 17. I didn't think about it anymore. A year ago I started therapy, other reasons. As usual the topic of my upbringing came up and it brought back many feelings I wasn't aware of. I realized that although my parents were always good to me, I had never really felt close to any of them and still have a lot of resentment, that they made me feel like I had to compete for my parents' attention with random strangers. A while ago, I visited them and they told me they are going to take part in a documentary about polyamorous families, and that the producers would like to include interviews with the children. So they would love if I could agree and tell everyone that polyamory doesn't mess kids up. All my resentment bubbled up and I said that I cannot agree because I would not be able to say anything positive. My parents looked shocked. I had never brought this up before, and asked why, and I unloaded all, that I always felt pushed aside. We barely had any family time without strangers intruding. It turned into an argument and I became loud and yelled that the truth is it did me up and they shouldn't have had a child. My mother cried and my father said I should probably leave. So I left and was shaken up for the rest of the week, but also felt regret because I've never made my mom cry before. Later my father sent me a message that was like, "We are sorry you feel that way. Can we have a calm discussion about this soon?" Even though I tried to, it's like I can't reply. This argument brought something very emotional up in me.